So fast forward, that was really the impetus to leading me to found the Construction Coach, which is Australia's first construction coaching business in terms of a career sense, because there is no other platform or avenue where you can fast track your development in the industry by understanding what the industry looks like and trying to piece it all together, because it's taken me the best part of 7 years to piece it all together. And people always have come to me, well, how did you have your successful career in construction? So I'm paying it forward through many different ways, and of course the book is one of those ways.
Today we speak with Elinor Moshe. She's an ambitious and driven thought leader and dedicated mentor in the construction industry. Her passion to guide, inspire, and direct future leaders and industry professionals to construct their career led to her founding the successful platform, the Construction Coach. Elinor has been featured in the Australian National Construction Review, Property Council of Australia's Top 500 Women in Property Program 2019, Top 100 Women in Construction, and is frequently a speaker, guest lecturer, and panelist. Elinor is also the host of the successful podcast Constructing You. Following the podcast, Elinor released in August of 2020 her book Constructing Your Career, a one-of-a-kind for people who want inspirational, practical action, and unconventional career intelligence to construct their career. She holds a Master of Construction Management and Bachelor of Environments from the University of Melbourne. So let's dig into this episode and learn a bit more on how she got started. Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. We're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life. Want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. Hey, Elinor, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
My pleasure. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Elinor, tell us a little bit about yourself. We met through Matchmaker.fm. I know it sounds funny, but it's a pretty awesome platform where you get to connect with other podcasters and be guests on other podcasts. It's a pretty cool platform. I've gotten a lot of really cool folks from there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're up to, what you're doing, how you got all started.
It is such a wonderful platform, and any platform that offers a world of opportunity, I'm more than happy to be on. So I am a thought leader in the construction industry. I'm the founder of my business, the Construction Coach, and as an ambitious and dedicated mentor and leader in the industry, I work to guide, inspire, and direct future leaders and industry professionals to achieve higher compensation, faster progression, and more recognition in their careers in construction. And I do that via private mentoring. I also have a podcast as well. It's called Constructing You. And in a few weeks from today, I am releasing my first book, Constructing Your Career.
That is fantastic. That is beautiful. Construction is such a, I see that there's construction happening all around us, right? There's new buildings coming up, there's new homes getting started, and new builders, setting up new places. How did you get into construction? It's a big yes, that's something that happens, but it's I'm sure there's a lot to know about it.
Definitely, and it is an industry which affects and impacts every single one of our lives, but it's not an industry which people actually go and think to have a career in. It's just something that happens, or people tend to think, oh, if I work in construction, the only way I can do that is via trade, not construction management. So I did my undergraduate here in architecture, and whilst I am a creative, I'm not creative in the sense of design. And
Mm,
I had lots of frustration with the design process. So a few experiences in the undergraduate degree
yeah.
led me to the construction management masters. So I enrolled in that. Not that academia is the pathway to success or required, but of course, you follow convention when that's all that you know.
Yeah.
And only in retrospect do you realize, well, that wasn't required, but it was necessary as part of my journey. So I did start
Mm,
the master's degree, and it just opened up a whole new world to me about
yeah.
structure and processes and the financial and ethics and processes and engineering
Mm,
and so many elements that are associated with shaping the built environment.
yeah.
And I fell in love with the process, the opportunity that the industry afforded. But again, when I was standing at the periphery of my own career, I felt lost, I felt confused, and definitely overwhelmed because it is such a large industry that is not short of opportunity. And university only affords you one framework of having a career, and that is, I'm going to be a project manager. So
Yeah.
off you go into industry and you say, I'm going to be a project manager, having no idea what that actually means. So
Mm,
of course, you spend time in industry and you figure it out, and you figure it out the long and hard way when you're by yourself type of thing. So fast forward, that was really the impetus to leading me to found the Construction Coach, which is Australia's first construction coaching business in terms of a career sense, because there is no other platform or avenue where you can fast track your development in the industry by understanding what the
mm.
industry looks like and trying to piece it all together, because it's taken me the best part of 7 years to piece it
Wow.
all together. And people always have come to me, well, how did you have your successful career in construction? So I'm paying it forward through many different ways, and of course the
Mm.
book is one of those ways.
That's beautiful. The one thing that you mentioned, you went the conventional route of going to school to learn about construction. And if you're not a tradesman in any specific area, I think school is the way to go to get your feet wet, to understand what is happening. I mean, people who become doctors or become engineers or, they go through school because that's that's the straightest path to getting into technology or medical. Plus, based on, I guess, like especially medical, you're dealing with human lives, or you're dealing with what you have to kind of go through that step by step. But for electrician or for those are trades where either you're doing something with it, and then you learn the trades, you learn all the different avenues, the terminology and whatnot. But it makes sense that you took the path of least resistance. But I mean, who's to say that was least resistant or not? But it makes sense. Like, you need a starter point for anything at all. So that's
Definitely.
really,
And
yeah.
I would hate for doctors to bypass that fundamental
Exactly.
requirement. So
Exactly.
yeah, but in the career context, it can be in the construction context, it can be bypassed, and it's
Yeah,
such a practical industry that you learn via doing,
absolutely,
as you said.
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. There's a good friend of mine. Well, not a friend of mine. I met him through. What was that? We were looking for somebody to help us, do some installation in our house and do some work. And we met this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I've been building homes for the better of the past 50 years. Growing up doing it, since I was 14 years old, building homes straight from the ground. And you see, you meet tradespeople like this, and they have stories, and all the things that they've done, and it's all experience. And it's amazing how, like, the insight they have around things. And it's really a gift to know somebody, or it's important to know somebody of such experience, so then you can steer clear of malpractice, or not even malpractice, but people just trying to take your money for it and be like, oh no, you got to spend $2,000-$3,000 to get this problem fixed, instead of trying to find all the different solutions that are possible.
Yeah, there's no shortage of cowboys or people that take advantage of the industry. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that's the side of the industry in which some people first experience and then have
Yeah,
this tarnished view of the industry. But
yeah,
just as there are dishonest people, there are absolutely exemplary people in the
yeah,
industry as well, globally, I am sure.
absolutely. Sweet. So construction, you got into construction, you started with architecture, you mentioned, and then you got into construction because you had trouble with the design part of it. Now, what's funny is that I call myself a designer, but I never in my life did take a color theory or design specific class. It just happened to be something that I was either passionate about, or something I just started doing, just learning, and just being fascinated about technology. And it wasn't until 10 years ago that I actually was like, all right, let me figure out what's the next step up, because I was just designing web pages, looking at other pages, stealing designs. But I was like, what's the philosophy behind it? And then I learned about user experience design and took some courses. And I'm like, oh, that's what everybody keeps talking about. And then what's even funnier is that user experience design specifically is a very newer philosophy also. I mean, I learned about it 10 years ago, and people have been probably talking about it for the past, I don't know, 25 years. When the first, one of the first books came out, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So construction has a much larger, a much deeper history around it. Like, there's so many standards of rules that you got to follow, especially when you're building a home, or you're building constructing a large building. And there's stuff like leads, and there's stuff like being gold standard, and being going green and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about that, if you know anything about it at all.
I definitely like it has to be a highly regulated industry in terms
Mm-hmm.
of code standards and practices, and that's part of the experience piece, which
Yeah.
comes when you work in the industry. So yeah, it's necessary. Otherwise, if you had everyone doing something completely different, it
Yeah.
would be an absolute disaster when people try and move from company to company or
Mm.
trying to price works or anything like that. So, yeah, regulation in the industry is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah. I mean, you are, um, people are living in these buildings, and you got to have those standards in place. So if there's an earthquake or a hurricane or any natural disaster, people can count on the structure to stand still and keep them
Yeah, at minimum,
at minimum.
minimum
Wow.
requirements. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. So you started your journey 7 years ago, or something like that. You mentioned you've been doing this for 7 years, or and what motivated you to pick this specific area of expertise? I mean, you did to architecture in college, right?
Yeah, our
Yeah,
university equivalent. Yes.
university. Yeah. So what inspired you to go into architecture?
Architecture at first, during year 12, I
Mm-hmm.
was again a creative. Like I enjoyed art and design, and you go to a few open days at university and you go
Mm-hmm.
to the not the arts degree necessarily, but equivalent equivalent disciplines, and you start discovering, oh, this is the architecture world, and you get to be the person who who has their name up in lights, and it's really not like that. And every course advisor that I went to for architecture said, don't do it because it's not what you think it is. And of course, when someone says, don't do something because it's too hard, I will by default say, well, I'm going to do it and I'm going to prove it to you. But unfortunately they were right at the time, but it was still a good experience because it gave me the appreciation for the built environment and how we understand and operate it. And I really did love the history side
Yeah.
of the degree, but it is this fascination of understanding history and architecture and design and philosophies. Like architecture is such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful amalgamation of so many different worlds. So I don't regret that, I did it. It allowed me, it was obviously a necessary stepping stone
Yeah.
to work, getting into construction management and working in project delivery and then starting my own business and then the thought leadership aspect of construction management. So, of course, in retrospect, it's always easier to connect the dots than it is looking forward.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The one thing that you mentioned, about the history of architecture and the philosophy of architecture, and the many artists and the many creators that we've seen, and they've created some really iconic structures all around the world. It's beautiful, like the Sydney Orchestra.
Sydney Opera House, yeah.
Yes, sorry, I don't know words.
I know it's okay.
The Sydney Opera House is so beautiful, and it's all constructed out of concrete, which
Yeah,
is
to think that that type of construction methodology and technology was done when it was done. I don't remember the exact figures on it, but it was grossly over time and grossly over budget back
yeah,
then. It would have been a disaster in today's terms.
yeah, that's amazing, right? So architecture into construction, now being one of the top 100 women in construction, that's really quite an achievement. And what are some of your plans? So you did mention that you have a podcast coming out. Tell us a little about your podcast.
So podcast is out. I released it in March and it was
Oh, nice.
perfectly timed with COVID in a way because everyone was at home and they had nothing to do except listen to my podcast, which was fantastic. But, they got to discover it. And, Construction U is really about the premise on, first you become and then you achieve. First, you have to become the person who has an exemplary and exceptional and excellent career in construction. So I interview exemplary leaders and industry titans in construction and property. And I don't show people only what they've done because you can see that via LinkedIn and
Yeah,
that really
yeah,
doesn't tell
exactly.
you much. So I talk about who they are and who they've had to become to achieve what they have, because when you unveil what it really takes and the successful journeys of others, albeit a 10-year overnight success in most instances, 10, 20 years, then it really works to show people what's possible. And it's my duty as an industry leader to show people what's possible. But when you immerse yourself in people who have believed in themselves, who have started up the business, who have had, who have reached the peaks of their careers and are still growing and developing and exploring their own careers as an evolution piece, then you start to change your own belief system. And it's this podcast has so many positive consequences in that people are, had one of my clients come and say to me, I started listening to the podcast and it was like looking in the mirror and I didn't like what I was seeing. So I had to do something about it. And, other people have said, I wish this podcast was available when I started. And the feedback has been just phenomenal. And maybe it was because of the pandemic and people are locked at home, or maybe it's just brilliant content. But I've ticked over 13,000 downloads globally in the span of 5 months since launch. So, there is no other podcast like this, which has this
Yeah,
conversation. A lot of the discourse in construction is really focused on the technical, how to build, how do two materials go together, what's the status of the industry type of thing. But that has little weight and bearing to your career because your technical skills only make up 10% of career success. You can teach everyone, you can teach anyone who has an interest
yeah,
technical skills, but it's the person which actually drives the career success. So it's just going really, really well. And, it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to deliver this type of value and content to the industry.
That's so awesome. I've got my little daughter crying in here,
Yeah.
so apologies. Yeah, it's upstairs. Can you take her upstairs?
What does she want? Dummy. We don't have any.
How old is she?
She wants some. She is 2 years old.
Ah, cute.
Vitamin gummy?
Danny, say hi.
Say hi. You're here?
No.
She's not here. Okay.
The power of editing.
Power of editing, and we're back after those messages from our sponsors. So all of that, what you're saying, you look at that journey on how people got here, and yes, people can look up on LinkedIn like, oh, this guy's been doing this for this time. Oh, they're a speaker. They're been on stages and a lecturer and whatnot. So yes, all of that is available, but the journey, the story, the pathway that you took, why you make the different changes and all of those things, that's what really connects you, the audience, with the guest, with the host, with and yeah, and your podcast, like you mentioned, it's one of a kind because there's not a lot of people talking about construction on the podcast, right? It's a very specific topic, and it's awesome that you made the leap and brought it out, and now it's available for people to learn these journeys and these stories. And I think that's where I ended up going to as well with my podcast. I started talking to myself, and I was like, okay, I can only talk to so much to myself, and let me bring on some guests. Let me learn from others on what they've done, what their journeys have been. So very similar, but mine is like all over the place, right? Hacks and hobbies. Like, well, there could be a million hobbies. There could be a million hacks and whatnot. So it's still amazing to connect with people and have those conversations. I think that's the most powerful part and my favorite part of the podcast process too.
Definitely. It's a world of opportunity that we have.
Absolutely. All right, and this is why I don't record on weekends. Yeah. All right. So what we'll do is, so we learned about you as as all right. We're gonna take another little quick break.
No problem.
Come right back. This is so
No, that's okay.
embarrassing, but
No problem.
yeah. So we learned about your journey. We'll learn about the path you took to get into this construction industry and become the construction coach. It's really powerful story, and I absolutely love it. And what you're doing for the community by giving back, by teaching them, by showing them how anybody can. Not, I mean, I guess I could say that, right? And how anybody can get in and become or get into the construction industry and construct themselves. How?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first part of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
constructing you, and then you construct your career. So it's really like a lot of my mentoring also focuses on the internal work that is necessary to have external success, because when I have done the internal work, which is the
Yeah.
most important work,
Yeah.
that's when the biggest changes have come about. And that's why a big part of my ethos and my message is, well, what is the greatest project that you will ever get to work on? It is yourself, of course.
Yeah.
And people in the industry spend way too much time working on projects external to themselves without actually realizing what's important to me, what's my own vision, who do I need to become, and that whole discourse. So it is available and affordable to anyone, but First, we do the becoming, and then we do the constructing of your career.
You mentioned some really powerful things there. I was having a conversation the other day, and the conversation was around, some people are working 7 days a week because they're in an industry where they're recruiting. They got to make sure that they meet the requirements, and not just meet the requirements, but find the person so they can place them, because that's their business. That's their entire business, right? They're placing people, and they got to be available for support. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I don't think that's the only way that you can make a 7-figure income or even an 8-figure income. You got to have systems in place, right? So I didn't really go into the deep of the conversation because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to preach because I'm not there yet. But once I do get there, I was like, hey, look, it's possible. I've done it. Look at this. You don't need to be working 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, because what's really important, time is something that will not come back, right? This is precious time. It will not return. You've got to focus on yourself, your family, and what you're bringing to the world. And is this what you're teaching to your children? So I think that's very, very important. And I keep looking at myself and laughing, my kid's crying and I'm recording a podcast here, but which is fine, right? I mean, I'm a work in progress. So it's really powerful to work on yourself. And, everybody says the grass is greener on the other side. Well, yes, it's greener on the other side because those people that you're looking at, they are watering their grass a lot more. So if you were to water the grass that's by your feet, then yes, your grass will be green too.
Absolutely. And that people just go through the mechanics of life. And one of the first questions that I ask people when they approach me for mentoring, it's, what do you want? What do you actually want? And I also, once upon a time, I drew blanks when I was posed that question. I
Yeah.
was fumbling around for answers, and it was only through long introspection and long and deep introspection with myself, and I did that through journaling, did I actually unveil what it is that I want, what is my own vision. And when that had clarity and I
Hmm.
took lots of belief and ownership into that, only did the right people and opportunities, specifically in terms of my thought leadership mentor, come
Hmm.
about, that it showed me, well, where you are today, it's not the only vehicle for getting to where you want to be. And you're right, it's not about the struggle. Some people wear the struggle and I work 7 days a week like a badge of honor. Well,
Yes.
yes, work 7 days a week, I do the same, but it is on something that I'm so passionate about, that is
Yes.
what I'm here to be doing, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. And having that clarity is so, so important because sure, I could be running around doing ten different jobs and not have clarity and totally be stressed out all day long. Like, oh, I gotta get this done, I gotta get that done. But when you find that clarity and you align all of the things in your life into a single focus, I think that's where we get the biggest rewards.
That's the game changer right there. There's your hack for all your
That's
audience and your listeners.
exactly, exactly. Put it all together, and boom, you're there. All right, awesome. Well, Eleanor, this was a ton of fun talking with you. We do have some questions for our guests that I ask towards the end of the podcast.
Sure.
What is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
Um, Maybe piano.
Hmm.
Back at the time, I do find the piano to be a beautiful instrument, and I know
Mhm.
there's a lot of dedication that goes behind learning an instrument. So this is obviously speaking back in grade 6,
Yeah.
once upon a time. But otherwise, anything of the athletic nature would have been also beneficial to build that habit and discipline in me from a young age. Now I just work on it myself.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I wish I knew how to play the piano because I am musically inclined and that I love music, and I used to be in a band a while back when I was a singer, and I was like, I wish I knew how to play some music or come up with music scores so then I can write songs because I used to write poetry back when I was younger. So that would have been something cool as well.
In the next lifetime.
Maybe in the next lifetime. Or maybe when I get all the systems in line, right?
Yeah.
Find some time to do it. All right, next one. What did you want to be when you were a child?
Many things. In year 10, it was a lawyer because I have Jewish parents and they want you to be a lawyer or a doctor. So it started off as a lawyer, and then I have always, ever since I can remember, I think since the age of 16, roughly, I've been in love with cars, especially Alfa Romeo. And
Mm.
then I wanted to become a mechanical engineer and to
Mhm.
design cars. But I probably just wanted to own one rather than design one. So it became that. And then it became artist, and then it became an architect, and then it became something in construction, and then it
Yeah.
became a thought leader. But that's also part of the problem with the system. It's defining what it is that you do via job titles. And
Yes. That's
right now you can't call me an author. That's just one part of what I do.
yeah.
Same as you, podcasting is one part of what you do, and people get really frustrated when they can't fit you into a box. But
Yeah.
it's not about the labels or the titles. It's about being your own brand and having businesses that are an
Mhm.
extension of that brand. And if people don't know where to place you, well, it's all the better. It means I'm doing something right.
Yes. That's so true, right? I can call myself so many things, but for the longest time I was like, yeah, I'm just a designer. And
Yes.
designer is a broad word too, right? Oh, what kind of designer are you? Are you interior designer? Because sometimes they didn't have a category for graphic designers or something like that because it's such a new field comparatively to, decades or centuries of other tradesmen and craftsmanships and whatnot. Beautiful. What is your favorite movie or TV show? And if none, how about a book?
book the book, it's called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by
Mm.
Vishen Lakhiani. And that was a game changer for me. The book actually has a disclosure that it's going to shake up your belief system and rock your world.
Yeah.
And it did very much so. And that was a very formative book for me, as was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon
Mm.
Hill. And
Oh my God.
I love and appreciate the book An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield. The guy had intergalactic career and
Yeah.
experience. So someone who has lived a life like he has definitely has something to say on the human experience. And there were many other books that were
Yeah.
formative, but I absolutely love reading and exploring different minds.
Nice. Yeah, Chris Hadfield has a mastermind class too on masterclass.com.
Yes.
Really, really beautiful the way he talks and explains those theories and philosophies. All right, next question. What movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
Gatsby from The Great Gatsby.
Oh, nice. I like it. Who is your favorite superhero?
Does it have to be an actual character, or can it be a
Could
real
be
life
could be
person?
anything. It could be your superhero power.
Superhero pet. Look, I'll have to give this to my mentor, who is Ron Malhotra. He's someone who is larger than life, and
Mm,
he came into my life and changed everything about it. He
nice.
has this unique ability to see the entirety of your future potential
Yeah.
and hand it back to you and make sure that you believe it, as well as for the pathway and
Yeah.
processes as to how you're going to achieve exactly that. So he's one of the most important people in my life, and he has a very special place between my heart and my mind for everything
Nice.
that he has done for me. So he's the superhero in this situation.
Fantastic. Well, Elinor, this was a lot of fun talking to you. Where can my audience find you?
They are more than welcome to connect with me and follow the journey. I'm on Instagram at Elinor Moshe _ and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Elinor Moshe, and visit my website, elinormoshe.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elinor. This was a lot of fun. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the episode. Thanks so much for listening to our guest on this episode. Please send me an email at junaid@hacksandhobbies.com to tell me what you loved about our guest today. You can find links mentioned in this episode on the hacksandhobbies.com website.